whenever science comes to the ultimate truth, it's always in harmony with what the Bible has already stated.
Hey there, I hope you're having a good day. If you have the time, you can come listen to me untangle some misunderstandings within the realm of science and religion. My belief is that these two spheres are actually very different ways of thinking. They're different in their application, utility, and their process. Before we get started, we need to differentiate religion and theism versus science. For this video, I'm going to define religion as an organized belief in a deity or deities. Usually that's supported by their written and their oral teachings. Theism is a belief in usually a single deity, and you don't necessarily have to belong into an organized religion in order to have that belief. This means that every religious person is a theist, but not every theist is a religious person. I'm mostly interested in religion because it encompasses the belief of a group of people usually, and the organization makes it so that they have these rules that they apply, and they usually do influence how people see and have a relationship with their belief to their god or deity. That being said, religion and theism is really rooted in our culture. Most of our history have people believing in these types of beliefs, making it really important in how people view themselves and how we look at history in general. By this very definition, it means that theism and religion function under the realm of the supernatural. This means that they have beliefs that we won't necessarily consider to be in our natural world. That means that they might not be susceptible to the senses that we have access to. This is why religion hinges on faith. Science and the scientific method, on the other hand, are quite different. Science deals with the material world or the natural world. The scientific method, on the other hand, involves having some kind of theory that you have. When you have that theory, you then want to test it, usually trying to isolate different things in order to get the result that you are desiring to get. Notice I use the word theory there. Theory is a colloquial word, colloquial meaning we use it in our everyday language. In the science world, a theory would be called a hypothesis. When a scientist is trying to study something and they're wondering how they're going to go about it, their theory is called a hypothesis. As an example, if you're wondering if gravity makes it so that larger objects fall faster than smaller objects, your theory can be something like, larger objects fall faster than smaller ones. That's a really vague theory, I know. But if you're trying to test for it, you can have different weights of objects, different volumes, different sizes, shapes. That's very basic. We can get into it a little bit more later. With that, you can isolate between if you want to know if something larger can fall faster or something heavier can fall faster. So there's many different steps. And by the time you've isolated these different things, once you have a method in which you've isolated how you're going to go about testing specifically for size, then you can actually go ahead and start your testing. After then, you are going to have your results. That's a really simple process of how a scientist might go into experimenting with something using the scientific method. Science really hinges on curiosity and our willingness to pursue the truth and material evidence. Now that we have how I view science and religion out of the way, we have a video here in which an Iglesia Cristo pastor is saying that true science always falls within the Bible. I don't like that we're using the word true because true can really vary depending on opinion. The reason I don't like that is because if you go about life with the idea that if I get someone to be in my religion, then we can have the same truth. The fact that for you to get to a truth, you have to already be in a religion and already believe certain things. This means that if you're trying to get to a general truth with someone, you both already have to start in the same position. You already have to believe in the Bible. You already have to believe in God's truth. I don't know if that's useful for anybody. Imagine if you're trying to argue and test for something, and before you can even get started, someone has to change your beliefs on something. It's not the best. Needless to say, I don't think me and Philip have the same definition of truth. We are going to get it out of the way. I'm not going to address the Bible is the truth because the Bible tells me so kind of things in this video. The reason for that is that can be applied to any holy book. If you open any holy book, they've definitely said something that still applies to this day. I would wager that you could probably read most books and get them to say and relate to something you're experiencing in your everyday life. That's why we need to have objective things to use to measure these things. We really do have to base things on logic and evidence, or else we're not going to get anywhere. We're all just going to try to be evangelical and get each other to be in each other's religions, which is essentially just someone's opinion. Unfortunately, because religion is so intangible, it really does just rely on your interpretation and your opinion. Before we get started here, a little factoid for my Filipinos. I don't like that we got this one wrong.
Who was the first person to circumnavigate the Earth, empirically proving that it is indeed round or spherical? I'll give you a clue. This happened in 1519.
Ferdinand Magellan was the man who proved that the world was round.
No, Ferdinand Magellan was not the first person to, circumvent the Earth. He's not. I would expect another Filipino to know this. Didn't Lapu-Lapu kill him? It's just so funny to me that you can't even take his word for like a historical factoid. It's not Ferdinand Magellan. He died in the Philippines before he could circumvent the Earth. It was likely Juan Sebastian Elcano who led the expedition after his death. Maybe he's the one who circumvented the Earth. But let's be honest, it wasn't a single person. He had a whole crew.
Let's read here in the book of Isaiah 40 and 22. This is what we are told by God through his prophet Isaiah. And it says here, "It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in." What was the Bible's declaration about the shape of the earth thousands of years before Magellan? Well, God had already declared in the Bible that the word world is a circle, or it's spherically shaped.
All right, we're getting started with Isaiah chapter 40 and the verses 22. Isaiah is in this passage saying that God sits above the circle of the earth. We are interpreting circle of the earth to mean that the earth is round. We don't necessarily have a reason to interpret circle and round to be the same, but this interpretation is not the worst I've seen, but let's get into it. One of the leading scholarly theories is actually that ancient Israelites believe that the world is more like a dome. This means that the land is flat and then the heavens kind of go over it like a dome, that kind of thing. This is because of the way they've also written Genesis to be. The King James Version and certain other translations still use the word firmament in Genesis. That firmament is essentially what God was using to separate the waters from below to the waters from above. They didn't know about precipitation, so they genuinely believed that there's water up there, water down here, and now God created this land for us away from that water. That firmament that's in Genesis is believed to be the sort of dome shape that kind of makes it so that heaven doesn't come crashing down on earth. This is also likely why tent and curtains are used. If you think about a tent, you think about something on a flat surface, right? That's where you lay. The tent is on top of you. That's how you can envision it. My thing is that ancient Israelites wrote really beautiful poetry. This passage has some wonderful imagery, especially when they're using the circle of the earth or the tent or the curtains. It's wonderful. Now, using our modern understanding of what the world looks like to say that Isaiah said circle, therefore he means round, is really just projecting an understanding that we do not know if they had. And most of their expressions within the Bible kind of points to the fact that they don't believe the earth is round. Think about it. We live in a completely different world than they did. It would be very interesting if you did have a tent and you set it on top of a spherical rock. I would love someone to try that. That would really hurt, but just in case. For this first one, I want to say it's a little misleading, but I guess it's not the worst interpretation.
Let's find out here, what was the belief or what was the teaching in the Bible regarding how earth is suspended in space? Here in Job 26 and 7. Now this was written a long time ago. Let's read here. Job 26 and 7. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. On nothing. You see, Brother Bob, the Bible stated thousands of years ago that the world is suspended in space.
Our next one is Job chapter 26, verse 7. Apparently this is talking about space. The passage says that the earth is suspended on nothing, and apparently that's supposed to talk about space. I guess the implication there is that space is nothing, which it's not. Space is not nothing. I would like a definition of nothing from him, I guess, to really understand, but I don't really know how he can interpret space as nothing, considering it for sure has gases and radiation. Are like the asteroids part of space? I don't really know what he's considering part and not part of space. Hanging on nothing? That's not space. I also don't think that this passage is meant to be taken literally also. Like, it might be trying to say that God is so powerful that he can literally suspend something in the air with nothing holding it. We can't say that space is nothing in the same way that we can't say light, sound, air is nothing, essentially.
This is how else the word of God is true, and we can count on it. We can rely on it. The Bible says here.
Again with Isaiah 46, 10 to 11 now this time around. I addressed that in a different video. Go ahead and watch that if you want to see what I think about this alleged prophecy. Let's just say it's not a good look.
An example is about the increase of knowledge in the future and its effects. And that's written here in Daniel 12:4. Daniel 12:4, again, written thousands of years ago. This is what the Bible says regarding that. But Bob and dear viewers, what we read here is a prophecy about the increase of knowledge. And as a result, people will be running to and fro. Now, we know that people know so much more today compared to in the past. What's one of the results of this increase in knowledge that we see? Innovations and inventions, specifically in the fields of transportation and communication, which has really taken up, especially in the last few decades. Now, according to the Bible, what would be the result of this increase in knowledge? The Bible says, many shall run to and fro. Do we see this? What do you think, viewers? Do we see this? Yes, we do. We see this in the increased frequency of travel within countries and around the world. And it's the same when it comes to communications, especially with the advent of social media, with ideas whizzing to and fro around the world.
I really need a clear definition of what a prophecy entails. We're using prophecy really loosely, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. I define prophecy as a prediction of what's going to happen in the future. That obviously has to be written or stated in the past, and it has to occur in the future. Just because something is written in the Bible doesn't mean it's meant to be commentary on what's going on in our lives right now. Daniel 9 could probably be considered a better prophecy, but even that I'm a little shaky on, to be honest. If you didn't know, the Old Testament and the Hebrew Bible are essentially one and the same, they're just kind of in different orders. When Daniel was written, the Jews didn't really see Daniel as a prophet, which is why in the Hebrew Bible, Daniel is under writings. They kind of saw him more of a teacher, not really a prophet. Obviously, if you're Jewish or if you're Christian, you're going to have different views of that because Daniel 9 apparently predicted Jesus. I say that Daniel 9 is a better example of a prophecy solely because clearly Christians did see it as a prophecy. Look at the New Testament, they're referencing it with Jesus, so at least canonically, there's another book connected to Daniel 9 as a prophecy. I don't necessarily see it as talking about Jesus, but if you're interested, go ahead and look up Daniel 9, look up how people think, predicted Jesus and all that. I'm also not understanding why it's so special for someone in the past to say that at some point, not even in the future, not even a specific date, just in general, people are gonna get smarter. They're gonna have more knowledge. Not sure what I'm supposed to get from that because I feel like that's a given. Even at the time, they probably did look at their history where they had a lot of oral stories and some of the writings that they have, and they're looking at what used to happen, and they think that they're doing better. That's just what happens when you're looking at history. I don't really know how it's a prophecy. The insanity of using to and fro to surmise that it predicted somehow social media and the way that transportation works now. Is there I wasn't aware that there's a minimum mileage when it comes to and fro. I didn't know that you couldn't say I'm walking amongst, my house, to and fro my house. I have to be going to and fro countries because, this is predicting that. No. To and fro can mean I'm using a makeshift boat and going to and fro. To and fro just means I'm going to and fro. It doesn't mean it has to be in a plane or has anything to do to predict, what's happening in the future. It has nothing to do with that.
We were taught in school, and it's commonly accepted that we are products of the natural process of evolution and not created by an almighty God. Should we reject creation because of the science?
I want to draw attention to that question because it's a common mistake that a lot of people make today. He said, should we reject creation because of the science? He equated evolution to science. That's a common mistake of many today. Remember, evolution is not a science. It's still a theory, and a crumbling one at that.
This is really the one I wanted to get into because it's really the meatiest meat of this video. Evolution isn't science. Of course, a pastor would say that. This very grand misunderstanding has a very small solution. He is using theory in the way that we in our everyday life use theory. They are not the same. Theory in our day-to-day life is not the same as theory in the scientific world. That is because of the scientific method. Remember earlier in the video when I said that theories within science are hypotheses. They're not necessarily one and the same, but it is more akin to that. Hypotheses are essentially ideas that can be proven or disproven. So you've put an idea out there and now we see if it's real and true or not. For something to be a theory in science, it goes through a rigorous process of testing. Other people review it, your peers, usually other scientists, and then other people try to reproduce it so that we then even have more evidence of the theory that we're putting out there. If we use my example of gravity earlier, this means that for it to be a theory, we have needed to have isolated the size of the object that we're thinking of. That means that we have to account for wind resistance, we have to account for mass, we have to account for weight, we have to account for volume, an enormous number of things we have to account for before we can even start testing. That's how rigorous science is. That is not the way we use theory in our everyday life. If I say I have a theory that chicken and tartar sauce go well together, I have that theory because I've tasted chicken and I've tasted tartar sauce. Maybe I've never tasted them together, but I can theorize that they probably taste good. It has to have evidence to be a theory in science. The process of the scientific method can only create answers that are considered the best possible explanations that we have right now. Even if it's 99.9999999%, most scientists really don't like to put that hard-line truth to things. That's because scientific ideas are meant to be built upon. Hypotheses are meant to be broken by the very nature of their existence. Now, before we keep going as well, I do need to clarify what evolution actually is. Evolution is not an answer for creation. Evolution doesn't think about whether or not we came from a creator or we came from some kind of scientific process. That's not what evolution is. Evolution is trying to answer genetic diversity. That means, why is there so many species on this earth? Did all of us fit on Noah's Ark? Essentially, evolution is a process in which a creature can adapt to best survive in the environment that it is in. An example is T-Rexes have these big jaws, these big legs, and these big tails, right? That made them really good at hunting. Because they were so good at hunting, they were barely using their hands, hence why their hands got smaller and smaller and smaller. Whatever they needed less of, they received less of. Whatever was the most useful got better, stronger. It's also why we have larger brains than that of less evolved types of humans. It is highly beneficial for an animal like a human to have a very complex thought process. We're not as strong, we're not as fast. That means we need to be tactical. We do not come from apes. Us and apes are not like this. We are not the same. The idea is that roughly 7 million years ago, there is a common ancestor between an ape and a human. I'm using ape in a very general manner. I'm not literally meaning the ape that we have in a zoo in this world. I'm using ape, but they're not really going to look like the apes that we know now. It's essentially a common ancestor with them. I'm going to simplify it, but imagine a lot of different strands of species, essentially. Boom, 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 boom. I'm going to use two. I only have two hands. Let's say that this line is going to become ape. This line is going to become human. They started with one similar ancestor, and then this part became what we call now, apes, chimpanzees, bonobos, that kind of group of creatures. This became humans. Now, like I said, this is roughly 7 million years ago. We don't even think that we don't really define these creatures as humans necessarily. They're our ancestors, but we don't even necessarily define them the same way we define a modern human until about 300,000 years ago or so. If you've been told that evolution means that we are related to monkeys, as in, they're our cousins, that is a very misunderstood way of putting that. So no, it didn't happen overnight. We didn't get Genesis and then evolve, It's a whole long process. The reason we have this type of information is because of archaeology, scientific dating, scientific matching, biology, that in which I'm not a professional at. So if you would like to know more, please go look more into evolution. He also mentions DNA. I would love for him to give me a Bible verse that confirms DNA, since DNA is true science. They then put up these two pictures of apparently scientists are leaving Darwinism. To be honest with you, what scientists disagree with are his weird beliefs about race science, not his beliefs about evolution. People tend to agree with his beliefs about evolution. They tend not to disagree with those. The hilarious thing about these 1,000 signatures from these scientists is that the source of it is the Discovery Institute. That is a Christian company. Apparently it initiated in 2001, and in 2019 it got 1,000 signatures. Isn't that wonderful? With the millions of scientists in the world, I'm glad they can find 1,000 religious scientists who agree that evolution isn't fact. But I mean, 1,000 to the millions, I don't know, you do the math. If you didn't know, actually, If you go to a college that is related to a religion, so let's say that something is a Catholic college or a Christian college, if it's an institution related to a religion, you have to sign something called a document of faith, which means that you will keep your faith throughout what you are studying. Think about that. No matter what they find out, no matter where science take them, they must still hold a faith belief. These people are already Christians with already the belief in creationism. Of course they're going to disagree with Darwin. That being said, Darwin in himself is not evolution. We've definitely improved on the ideas of evolution. Like I said, he had some really weird stuff about race going on there, so we've definitely left that part of it in the past. Once again, evolution is not trying to explain creation. If you want to believe in Genesis, go ahead and believe in Genesis. But come on, when you make such a weak case for evolution, they didn't even put any facts about evolution, they didn't even try to explain evolution. When you're not intellectually honest, your credibility goes down the drain. It just makes me think that you're genuinely afraid of the ideas, that you are afraid that you have nothing to combat it. Your only thing to combat it is the Bible tells me so, and we both know that doesn't work. Do you go to court and say the Bible tells me so? Do you go and investigate a crime scene and go with the Bible? No. So yes, these are not accidental processes. Until very recently, if you do not adapt to your surroundings, you will not survive. We are living in a time in which we are intelligent enough and we've made enough innovation in order to be safe, even if you're not necessarily the fittest in the survival of the fittest. That being said, that's not how it always was. It definitely was way more violent, way more dangerous back in the time where we were really in the survival of the fittest. That's not to say that we're not still functioning under that now, but that's a little bit more philosophical, and they have way too many ideas on that to get into here. You can trace these evolutionary lines in the DNA that Philip loves so much. Scientists use DNA all the time. But since, he mentioned DNA in this video, so I'm assuming he thinks it's true science. Like I said, I would love for him to have a passage about DNA. I didn't address this verse, Hebrews 3:4, and that's because I don't really think it's that strong of a verse, but I'm going to address it anyways. The builder of all things is God, because we know that houses were built by humans, therefore everything was built by someone. It doesn't really work in this case, considering we're not questioning the existence of humans. We know that houses exist because humans exist, and the existence of humans is not what's under investigation here. And if we're trying to prove God, you don't get to just say, hey, this thing that we don't even know if it's created or if cosmology is right and there's always been some kind of constant on Earth. We don't know these things, right? We cannot prove or disprove the feelings that God gives you. We cannot prove and disprove your interpretation of words. We can't prove or disprove the feelings you have in your heart. You know it to be true. Those things are not provable or disprovable. Science is not at all interested in dealing with those kinds of questions. Science's goal is to understand the processes underlying our natural material reality. By definition, God is not one of those things, so it cannot really play within the realm of religion. If we make scientific progress and it undermines religious beliefs, that's just how it's going to have to be, because we cannot stop the progress of science. It's our only way of really understanding each other on a material level. It functions within the realm of what can be understood, tested, and replicated. Supernatural things cannot be replicated or really be tangible in that way. This doesn't mean that it doesn't seem like at times they overlap together. It's kind of wonderful when they do overlap together. But unfortunately, it is just a coincidence, because those things cannot be replicated. That is the value of science. Everything you find out within science can be measured, replicated, reproduced. Your hypotheses can be tested. It is an ongoing process. That's also why he's saying that it's like not the truth, because if we get more information, then we can learn more from it. And he says that like it's a bad thing. The Bible was written for over 1,500 years, and you're trying to tell me you don't like a process? The Bible had to get books taken and put in and rewrote and da-da-da-da-da of all of it. So I don't know why we're sitting here thinking like it just appeared perfect out of nowhere. And they might not admit it, but honestly, the Bible has evolved, and we've evolved with the Bible as well. Just read Genesis. There's not much of it that you can really look at and say, yeah, that's relatable. I can apply that to my life. There are some crazy stories in that. I truly think that the beauty of the Bible is in the imagery and the literature within it. I think we can appreciate those things without trying to put this theology and this deity and these rules and you must do this and have these people believe. It really doesn't work considering all of it is a matter of interpretation. What I do think could really work is the realm of philosophy and religion, which I'm probably going to get into at some point because I think those two things are really more so related to each other because one is rationality and one is a theology, and you could kind of overlap them in ways that can make sense for sure. When I was writing this, I did really look up what kind of verse can have anything to do with DNA, and I think apparently there's one that people are solid on. It's Psalms chapter 139, verses 13 to 14. This is from a psalm called Search Me, O God, and Know My Heart, a psalm of David. Verses 13 to 14 say, For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. I think that the main interpretation is the knitting part, because it kind of could give this vibe, the way we see DNA, I guess. My thing is that this song implies that God is creating you inside your mother's womb. Unfortunately, with modern science, we know that that's not exactly what's happening. You know, there's the sperm, and there's the egg, and then there's that. If you think that that's God making someone, then I can't take that away from you, but I don't really think that's God making anybody. But also, our DNA isn't just created when our mom gets pregnant and we're baking in the oven. Our DNA is also found within the DNA of our parents, so a lot of it is already existing. We have a lot of their DNA and a combination of new DNA. There's a lot of things going on there. What I will give it, though, is that it has very beautiful language. Like I said, the knitting together of someone, that is quite beautiful to think about. Doesn't necessarily have to be DNA, though, but it's not a bad verse. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. Thank you for your patience.
Because of, and not because of blind, accidental processes.
That's why our viewers, you have to be careful what we believe in, especially in this world that we live in today. No one knows what to believe in. No one knows where to place their trust. They believe in everything that you see online, dear friends. You're going to believe everything that you see on social media.